welcome to the conference. This is Jasveer Mahil, and this is the third leadership conference. The first one was last year in April, and I know some of you were on that call with me. So I'm just really amazed at how deep the conversations are becoming over an 18-month period, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today. So Rajnarind, how about if we start with you then, since you were the first on the call?
Sure. My name is Rajnarind Kaur. I live in New Jersey, United States, and I'm so happy to be still a part of this and have met so many wonderful people. I think I've talked to many of you before, so I'm so glad to be here again. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajnarind. And Manjeet Singh? I think
Hi, Sat Sri Akal, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I hope all of you are well. My name is Manjeet Singh, and I live in London, United Kingdom, and I am a spiritual writer, currently writing a book, which is a contemporary version of Gurusahib, and I think this would be the first one of its kind. So I'm very good to be here alongside all of you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Manjeet Singh Ji. And Kamaljeet Kaur, you've been here with me right from the beginning of these conferences as well, and I'm really enjoying getting to know you even more through each conversation. So if you could just introduce yourself to the rest of the group.
Yeah, sure. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Shri Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I'm Kamaljeet Kaur. Thank you, Dr. Jasveer, for your kind words. Yeah, I have been involved in the journey for a little while now. It's been great getting to know, and I think we've met some of you as well in some of these discussions. My job, I work in a financial institution and protect customers from the harm of financial crime.
Wonderful, thank you. And Manmeet Ji. Manmeet Singh Ji.
Hi, Sat Sri Akal Ji. This is Manmeet. I'm Manmeet Singh Kalra from Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. And I think I've been in the first conversation. I missed the second one due to some emergency. Yep, and happy to be here. My job is I'm a career strategist coach and a leadership trainer. In doing that in the Asian region for all of you. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, wonderful. So the theme for this year's conference is synthesis. We started with stories last April, and then we talked about symbols in symbology in the October one, the November one, the autumn one, and now we're talking about synthesis. And the purpose of this discussion is to think about all the different influences that have had an impact on our behaviors and adapting to our circumstances, to our context. So it's not a case of either or, like this is good, the good way of, this is a good ideology and this is an ideology that is not as good. So we're not kind of contrasting the different ideologies that have had an influence on us in terms of their strengths and their weaknesses. What we're focusing on is the bridging between the two. How do we make sense of all the influences based on our own professional lives? So none of us are experts in this. I'm certainly not an expert in any of these topics, but we are all experts in our lived experiences. We're experts in creating our own meanings. And so I've just got some questions to stimulate the discussion. And if you could please raise your hand, the feature for raise the hand is should be at the bottom of your screen. And if you could raise your hand when you have a comment, then I will know who is ready to speak first. So my first question is about education itself. Now, in the Sikhi tradition, we are very influenced by the search for subjective truth, because we're taught that there isn't only one way to God, that every religion has its own essence of truth within it. And so that's very much about subjective truth, that it's based on our own interpretations, but that all paths lead to the same God. That is a very subjective way of approaching life. Whereas there's the alternative viewpoint, the scientific, let's say, viewpoint, where we are encouraged to search for the absolute truth, and that there is only one pathway, there is only one correct answer. And both of these ideologies have their own place. There is that search for the objective truth, and there's the search for the subjective truth, which is relevant to our own unique context. So how do we make sense of this, and how do we make meaning so that we are adapting and using both of these ideologies? So who would like to speak first about that? If you could raise your hand so that I can see. Can you all see the raise hand feature? The raise hand feature is, yeah, there you go. Kamaljeet, go. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
I don't mind starting us off. Thank you. So I guess when I think about, the subjective truth and scientific truth as such, and what Gurbani tells us, I think straight away of what does Sacha Badsha mean, and actually what does Gurbani teach us. And I think there's clearly some differential between having absolute faith and acceptance, for example, of things that may well seem almost mystical in some respects and maybe not comprehensible from a scientific perspective. And I think it's like you finding that I guess even ground where perhaps the two meet. I think when I think about Gurbani and what Sikhi teaches us, it's absolute faith, belief and understanding and everything that is, within that. And there's almost, I guess, some scientific value or theory that probably isn't quite in harmony with that. And yeah, I think it's about understanding the possibility of the scientific as well as, what Gurbani teaches us, and finding a medium where it allows you to understand and accept both views and have your own, belief or view.
And so much of our time and effort seems to be spent in battling between the two, through education, through higher education particularly. It's like, well, it's that battle between the science and the arts, like, well, in arts, maybe there's a place for interpretation, but not in the sciences. So how have you dealt with that in your own life then, Kamaljeet Kaur?
Yeah, I think if I'm honest, I think that when I sort of left university and got into working full time and was really looking at like developing my career, I really struggled with, there has definitely got to be more to life than this 9-to-5 grind that, we are all like little gerbils in the treadmill running around, and actually there's more to life than this. And that is, for me, that's where my Sikhi came into it, and that gives me that, I guess, grounding, that understanding, that belief, something to focus on, that centers me, I guess is what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way. And so there's a place for both, I think, in the taking into account the climate that we live in, or the world that we live in. But for me, I think this, my Sikhi is the superior. That's what that, and everything else, I guess, is kind of shaped around that, if that helps. I don't know if I've explained that very well.
Yeah. Let's think about ecology, for example, and we think about what the gurus taught us about environmentalism, and there's an art and also a science to ecology, isn't there? So that's so. Is there anybody else that has an opinion on that in terms of how do we marry these ideologies of, like, for example, with the scientific method or the logical approach to science, as though nature is separate to us rather than we are part of nature and interconnected, and I suppose that interconnected point of view leads to that subjectivity, because what we see outside of us is sometimes it's a reflection of what we see inside of us. When I know in my own case, I have a garden at the front and a garden at the back, and when I'm really busy and really kind of working a lot inside my mind, my garden, you can see that in my garden. He looks very confused. Whereas when I'm feeling kind of more kind of at ease and calm and relaxed, then again, that shows in the garden, it looks a lot more pristine. So what I mean by that is that the outer reflects the inner. You can walk into somebody's house and you can see their state of mind from the way their house is, the way their garden is. And so that's very subjective. Whereas an objective point of view is that, no, you know, nature and ourselves, we are separate, and there is, it's not really a reflection, they're separate entities. So so who else has a point of view? Kamalji, do you have anything more to say about that, or I'll just wait and see if anybody else has got their hand raised? Do you all know? Okay, Manmeet ji, go ahead, please.
I think in both, if you talk about the scientific world or even in the Sikhi, three simple words comes into mind is lead, motivate, and inspire. So it's always even in the Gurbani, it tells us, in somehow it tells us how to lead, how to motivate people, how to inspire people to be better in terms of education. So that's what we also do in the scientific world as well.
So with this concept of everything being interconnected and interrelated, how is that both scientific and also subjective? You know, again, like, you know, science can be both subjective and objective, in fact, you know, because the scientific method can be applied to both social sciences, and it can be applied also to the life sciences as well. So for you, how have you made sense of these two different, you know, the arts and the sciences, and the interconnectedness and the separateness?
So basically, I think I've used this principle of lead, motivate, inspire in the sense of, because when we talk to people, or when I do the subjective matter of, in terms of the subject matter expert and all that, I tend to always look back at could the Gurujis lead their troops? How did they motivate their troops for when we had issues? And how do we inspire our religion going forward? And I use that in my own leadership program as well, where I talk about how I inspire people, we don't have to be the guru to inspire, but how we can use their principles. That's how I relate it somehow together.
Okay, Rajnarendra and Manjeet Singh ji, do you? Okay, excellent. I was just wondering if that raise hand feature was working for you or not, and I can see that it is.
Yeah, no, it works. It works, but I know that Kamaljeet had her hand raised. I want to give her a second, and then I'll go after her. Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you. I was just thinking about, you know, the openness and interconnectedness of all life forms, just as you mentioned that, and I think there is a real separation with human beings and nature. And it's interesting you gave that example about your garden, for example, and then I almost think of it as a, you know, on a bigger scale, are we all really that busy that we don't look after the planet? And we think about, you know, where we are with climate change and the globe, you know, warming up incredibly, and the impacts it's going to have on future generations. Is that us being so detached from the planet that we live on, and, you know, the climate, the earth that produces us the food for us to, you know, for our sustenance? And I think for me there is a real simple interconnectedness between us and nature, and we need to probably make conscious efforts all individually to think about the choices that we make. And, you know, it's fine if your garden gets a little bit unruly for a couple of weeks because you're so busy, and you know, but having an awareness, I think, is the first step. I think when I think about interconnectedness and nature and us as beings, it's, you know, that divine spark of the Almighty being within all of us and everything around us, including nature, and us having an awareness of that, to have compassion for everything that is around us, to think about what is around us, look after everything. And yeah, I think it's that compassion and care for everything that is around us, not just us. Yeah, not just us. And I think it's, you know, is it selfishness? Is it us being driven to do something that perhaps we look past, or all of those other things? And yeah, when I think about this and I reflected on some of the questions, I really thought about Guru Har Rai Sahib Ji, seventh Badshah, who got so upset because his Jollah brushed against those flowers in the garden. And probably, I guess, do we think about nature in that same respect? And is there an opportunity for us to have more connectedness to nature around us? Yeah, I just wanted to get that one in. Thank you, Rajnarendra.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Perhaps like this is inspired by me wanting to justify why my garden is so unruly, but I did have, there's several foxes that live in my back garden, and last year around about this time I had the fox together with 6 cubs living in the back garden. So you see, there's when we, especially during the coronavirus pandemic, people notice this, that when we leave things alone, the wildlife just has it, we allow it to regenerate. And, so that's partly that's to kind of like say, well, there's a reason for allowing it to be unruly and to become wild and everything. It is wild, but there's a lot of wildlife. There's wasps and bees and all of the things that we, sometimes when we try and make it too pristine, there's not enough space for the natural kind of, for the natural ecology to emerge from it. So I just wanted to justify myself in saying that. Rajnarendra, go ahead, please.
Yeah, sure. So I probably take it to the extreme. There are times that I see some insects crawling around in my house, and I will sometimes, not all the time, but I do sometimes pick them up and take them outside, either by picking it up with a paper or something. Other times when I am absolutely frustrated, I actually, I think it kind of gets the better of me, and I'm like, okay, I'll rationalize it and say that, okay, I'm sending it on to its next janam. So it goes in both ways, but there is that compassion. And I think I've been fortunate in understanding, at least from where I'm sitting, the interconnectedness of both the planet and sciences, in the sense that we're questioned all the time, I think more outside of India, especially here in the States, because Sikhi is not as widespread to the point that every other person knows who Sikhs are. So growing up, being here by myself, my brother and I were the only ones in school, we were constantly questioned. And it really made me think as to, there was a reason way back when Gurusahibs were there that we wouldn't eat from disposable plates, and now we're going backwards, and now we're using that in the Gurdwara. We've now switched to more steel and Sarablo, where we lost that a lot. Where I'm teaching right now in the business school, and there was a huge sustainability conference, and my boys took part in it, and they talked about reduce, reuse, recycle. They talked about how the earth, we need to take care of it, because a few years down the road, when their kids are kind of there and their grandkids, what's going to be happening? So I think the understanding, the awareness has to be there, but we have to all do it at our levels. And where you're living. I know here again in the States, we're a little bit behind the times. Next month, we're getting rid of plastic bags. Whereas I know in England, in Paris, and other places, they've actually gotten rid of them a long time ago. So it's really understanding that and kind of making it part of your daily life. I know for years we're trying to get rid of the plastic bottle, and a lot of us have gone into taking a water bottle around, and we've gotten used to that. But it's still so prevalent here. Like, you can still go to a conference meeting at work and get a water bottle. So there are reasons, I guess each individual has to do their part in order to make things sustainable. But the government, the country that you're living in, has a huge, huge hand in that, in the laws and the regulations that they're passing. So the awareness, I feel like we should be bringing it up. I know a lot of the children, again, we brought it up in Gurdwara. We kind of said, get rid of the styrofoam, get rid of the plastic water bottles. But when they're huge functions, which I'm about to go to now, I'm pretty sure they're going to be water bottles. So it's just sometimes the ease of it as well, which is unfortunate. It should kind of be standard across.
Okay, wonderful. So my next question is about, so while I'm just waiting for other people to raise their hands, let me just ask the next question. Question is about destiny. So we can think of destiny in terms of there being an underlying spiritual design, which is, we refer to kismet, we refer to karma, we refer to, you know, the not simply this life, but things that we've brought into this life from other lives. And we think about the cyclical nature of life, that death is simply a transformation of life. Death is not the end. It's not a linear. We're not born and we die and it's a linear beginning and an end. It's a cycle. And then there's the alternative version of destiny where, you know, our Western education teaches us that it's about our choices, the choices we make, the decisions we make, the values that we aspire to, and that a lot of our life and behavior is governed by the environment. So how much of it is determined by the environment and how much of our focus is on fulfilling our individual potential, knowing that our destiny is in our own hands, as opposed to, well, there's a spiritual underlying invisible hand that's governing our kismet, and whatever we do, it's we just need to be in harmony with the spiritual design, and therefore if we are in alignment, the things that we will do will be the right thing to do. So how do we make sense of these two ideological influences on our behavior? So who would like to start on that one? So I'll just wait for you to raise your hand so that I know you are, I'm not putting you on the spot by asking you to comment.
I think Mr. Manjit Singh ji has been trying to raise his hand, but not by, he's using
I can't,
manually.
yeah, do you know, sorry, no, if you, yeah, I just want to check. Manjit Singh ji, do you know how to raise your hand? It's the icon at the bottom.
The sign of hand comes and goes off my screen.
Okay,
I
go
pressed
ahead.
it.
Yeah, go on.
I don't think it's going through to you.
Okay, yeah, let's go to you then, because we haven't heard from you for a while.
So I just wanted to make a point when you talk about your previous question about connectedness and oneness and ecology and environment. What I understand from Guru Granth Sahib, particularly from Guru Nanak Dev Ji, is very clear. Guru Nanak has made very clear that, and our current education is basically not fulfilling that purpose. What Guru Nanak has said, that is, we talk of science. Whatever we learn, whatever we do, whatever we have gained in this life, in our education, all is rooted into science. Basically, it is all objective. The subjective subjects are actually missing, more or less, from education. So, and I would say that science explains, life on Earth from the point of evolution. Whereas what Guru Sahib teaches us is that Earth itself is life. I mean, the entire Earth is a living planet. It is not that we are living on Earth. Earth is living through us. That is the idea that Guru Granth Sahib gives. So as long as we see it from our point of view, that we are placed on Earth, we are living on Earth, I think that is what differs from the comprehensive and the bigger point of view that Guru Sahib gives. It's not that we are living on Earth, it is Earth that is living through us, all living.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have any comments on that? Well, let me ask you another question then. So let's talk about how we create families. That's an important distinction. So with the ideology from Sikhi, we think of Sangat as being our family, and the larger the Sangat, the larger our family. So the family is not restricted simply to our biological families, it's linked to the spiritual, people that we feel connected with through the love So let's talk about love and family. Is, you know, are people in our family those that we love, and how big is our embrace in terms of how many, like how large can the community be that we sincerely believe that we love? And on the other hand, it can be that, well, we have to take care of our nuclear families, and that nuclear family can simply be just one person, ourselves. You know, there's a lot of people in the West that simply live on their own, and or with one person, you know, in partnership. And so there is the value in that as well, that you focus on a smaller number for, you know, aspiring for a greater amount of autonomy and freedom and happiness, or the larger number where we're aspiring for different values. We can't have autonomy and have a very, very large extended family, but we can have other values that we like, loyalty and like self-sacrifice, like, you know, other, so altruism, for example. So how do we make sense of these two concepts? One of the smaller and, you know, investing more of ourselves into the smaller amount, or the larger and extending ourselves. How, you know, in our lived experiences, how do we synthesize these two concepts and values from different worlds?
Okay, I'll try to explain, but this is a very, very vast question. And so I'm sorry, because my entire viewpoint is in spirituality. It is less to do with, you know, science and other things. Although science is the root of all spirituality in Guru Granth Sahib, but still, I'll explain it in a more spiritual way that I think you will agree with probably. What Guru Sahib tells us is about the creation, about the entire creation. Because you say, for example, one person makes a family, then there's a nuclear family, then there's an extended family, then there's a society, then there's a whole community, and that's how we grow the world. Now, the point of view that Guru Sahib makes is that creation itself is one, that is a oneness. So creation comes into existence. There's one God, there's one primal God that is the source of all creation. And creation happens through duality that we call in our common languages Maya. Duality is the word through which all the creation happens. One cannot create on its own. It's a duality that creates the entire creation. Now, there's a concept of Panch Shabad in Guru Granth Sahib. The Panch Shabad is the process by which creation happens.
How do
It
you
is a
make
process
sense
of
of
duality.
this? Yeah, sorry, Manjeet Singh ji, let me interrupt you by asking you to talk about how you, so we know what's written in the scriptures, but how do you, in your own life, how do you live these concepts? You know, how, in terms of your own kind of, how you have shaped your own life, how have you used these?
That is where I'm coming to. That is where I'm coming to. I mean, when we talk about oneness, we talk about the entire creation. Then it gets, it comes down to an individual through that chain. So now, if you talk about an individual and the nuclear family and the extended family and the society and the sangat, so this is the path. This is the path that we go to sangat. We come from duality, and sangat and all extended anyone else other than us makes our external connection. Through this duality, we have to get to the unity. That is what Guru Granth Sahib is all about. So it is through the Panch Shabad and the recitation of that Panch Shabad that we realize our reality. So at the end of the day, because we have the value of family, as Guru Sahib has explained, is this, that through the family we can grow. Through the love of our relationships, our children, our parents, our society, we grow. And through that growth, we ultimately realize the eternal love that is God.
Okay, great. Thank you. Kamaljeet Kaurji, how have you applied these concepts in your life?
Thank you. It's quite interesting because, naturally everyone has a lot of care, compassion, and humility for their immediate family, or the nucleus, like you say. And it's, to what point does that, I guess, expand from your wider extended family, sadhu sangat, and that. And I think amongst that is a bit of a battle between individual versus collective needs. And when I think about the sangat, I think about selfless seva and service to the sangat, and getting involved in the sangat, and actually how special it is to be amongst the sangat when you go to the Gurusahib or you're at Nagar Kirtan or whatever. And I think Gurbani teaches us that actually within the sangat is the Almighty themselves. So I think it's naturally, I think everybody will care about their immediate family, but it's to what extent can you filter that out almost as wide as possible against your own individual needs versus the collective society or community's needs. Yeah.
I've noticed people who, sorry, Rajnarind, no, keep your hand raised, please, Rajnarind, because then I know that somebody's waiting to speak, because otherwise I try and fill in the space while I'm waiting for someone to raise their hand. But I was just going to say to Kamaljeet Kaur that sometimes I have spent very little time with my own family because I'm doing so much in the community. And I know my brother does that as well. He has, for decades, he's spent so much time doing seva at the Gurdwara that we hardly ever see him at home. And so there's that balance of like, well, do we, because some people would say charity begins at home. We have to look after our own families, not kind of do seva at the expense of our own family. Like we can't neglect our own family and say, well, we're neglecting, our wife and our children, or, our partners, and we're neglecting them because I'm doing so much seva. You see, there has to be a balance of like what we do outside and what we do inside. And then on the other hand, it's like, well, I don't have time to go to the Gurdwara because I've got my children to look after. I know lots of friends like that as well, and so how do we balance this, like looking after ourselves and our own cluster, because we're born into families for a reason, aren't we? Well, again, it's like, are we born into families for a reason? Because some people would say that it's just a coincidence. The family that we're born into is just a coincidence. The real family or the family like that we make in terms of the love that we can share and whatever. And so again, there's different thoughts on that. Rajnarind, I was just filling the space. Go ahead, please.
It was wonderful filling of the space then. I think I wanted to touch upon two things. One was your comment before where you were talking about Kismet and how we actually do things. And to me, it's really, if you have that faith, uddam te karna, you have to always do your effort and trust, obviously, that whatever is happening is for the best. So if you're trying to do really well in a test, or you're trying to get into a university and you unfortunately or get a job and you don't get it, it's for some reason, but at least you've given your 150%. So to me, I think with myself and with my family, it's all about like, put your uddam there and do your uddam, and then whatever happens, and trust that, Gurusahib is doing whatever is supposed to happen. So that's there. And I wanted to comment on that. And then the second thing, I think this individual nuclear family and the wider family, we have a revolving door in my home, and everybody knows that. So we literally are housing people whenever and whenever they need a place and all. But I will say, having grown up with quote unquote American parents now, they're not of the mindset that they want to come live with me, even though they live very close. And a lot of the community asks and they say, oh, are your parents living with you? And I'm like, no, they have their life and they have their friends and they're very active and they drive and they do lots of things. We see them pretty much every other day or every day. And if they weren't so close, I would not have been able to commute to Wall Street and do all that I did. They moved for me. So there was that extended family, and that they felt that they wanted to be there for me. They moved their entire life to come closer to me, so that I can literally drop them off before I go to work. And they raised my boys. I give my parents my entire, everything that the boys are doing is because of my parents. And now I see that, my father just passed away. And my mom is like, no, I have my life and I'm good. As long as my hands and my feet are moving, please let me be. Your house is so chaotic with 4 boys and a dog, and I have my routine. And there's certain things that I want to do. But I know there is the opposite, right? I know that from India, a lot of people come and they want their parents to stay with them. I remember my Biji and Bauji couldn't. They didn't want to live here because their life was in India. So while we opened our house to them, they said, "Nay, I mean, we don't have anything. We're dependent on you then." And then you see that their health and I don't know, I feel like life somewhat kind of catches up to them, and then they grow older quicker. So they were more happier in India. My mom is happier in her home. I do have friends that have extended families and they all live together and it works. So I think for each individual, for each family, you have to kind of see, what's best and what's best for each individual. I know my boys would love to have my parents live here with us, but I know it'd mess up my mom's peace of mind, and she's like, no way. So that's my comments on that.
Okay, very interesting, excellent. Does anybody else have anything to add to that? Let me ask you another question then. So this is a question I know, Rajnarind, we've talked about this, about vegetarianism. We've talked about this concept of like, well, what, because food is so important. It's, they say what we eat is what we are, so it's one of these fundamental choices that we make about what we ingest. And, is it vegetarian or do we focus on making sure that we have a variety and a balanced diet, or what is better, and how do we, because all of us have had to adapt living far away. I live far away from where I was born. I was born in the Punjab and I live in England, and so of course I've had to adapt in terms of what I eat. I don't eat saag and makki roti every day, it's like, whereas in the Punjab that was the norm, whereas here it's a treat. When I go back to the Punjab, I don't eat chips, and so how do we make sense of like what is good food? Because when we go to the Gurdwara, I think this is an important concept to be thinking about. When I go to the Gurdwara, I take prasad, and it's there's so much sugar. I'm diabetic, but I still have the prasad, even though I'm diabetic, and I still have like, the rice, the pudding, and which is full of sugar. So how do we make sense of, like for centuries, we've been eating kra prasad, which traditionally is made with lots of sugar. How do we balance that with the illnesses that we have in the modern day and how we live? We don't work in the fields and work off all that sugar that we're eating, all the ghee that we're eating. We don't have that kind of lifestyle anymore, and yet we still, when we have saag, we might put butter in it because it's kind of, that's the way our parents did it. So how do we make sense of that? Who's got something to say about this? It's like these, the concepts of what do we eat? What is good for us? Is prasad good for us, even though it's full of sugar? Or should we have different, something different instead? Are we allowed to adapt? How do we adapt? Go ahead, Kamaljeet Kaur.
Thank you. This is a really interesting question because I'm vegan, so but I wasn't, haven't been vegan my whole life. And prasad or langar is an exception that I will make to my veganism. I will go and do darshan Gurusahib every day, and I will have a little bit of prasad, and I know that, the butter and sugar and stuff or ghee that's in there isn't necessarily good for me, I guess, from a scientific perspective, but I see the goodness that the prasad gives me from it's from the the blessings that it gives me and the blessings that we put in and the ardas that's happened to do the borg on the prasad. So I see it as an exception to my veganism and langar as well, but I won't have things like, for example, kheer or the rice pudding or that kind of thing. I know that if I have langar at the Gurdwara, the prasad roti will have butter on it, and I know that, yeah, when I go to the Gurdwara Sahib and have langar, which will only be once a week, I'll have langar, is an exception to my veganism, and I accept that because I think for me, my Sikhi overrules that, but I think everything in absolute moderation, you know, having that diet on a day-to-day basis, I don't think would be good if you are not very active or are not very mobile as such. Like, you make that comparison, you know, being in Punjab working on the kid, actually eating saga makki roti would be fine. Yeah, so I think it's very interesting. I have found that I've had to reduce my intake of prasad purely because I know how me eating that every day and having a handful is probably really not good for me or my waistline in some respects, but good for me from a blessings perspective. Yeah, so I just wanted to share my viewpoint on that.
Yeah, because I think, you know, in modern day life, when we're sitting on our chairs most of the time, we really don't have that lifestyle where when these traditions were initiated, we had a very different lifestyle where it wasn't unhealthy for us to be having Gada Prasad because we needed it for energy. We were working in the fields, and so burning it off was not, you know, so it didn't cause obesity, for one thing. Go ahead, Manmeet Singh. Manmeet, go ahead. Your microphone is muted.
Yeah. Sorry. I'd just like to add that on a sense that my late mom was a diabetic, but and she would go to the Gurdwara. She wouldn't eat sweet on much, but then when she would go to the Gurdwara, she would have a bit of the gra prasad or a bit of the kheer that is there, because it's Karmangal, right? She used to go, I think, to the Gurdwara almost like 3 to 4 times a week, but she made it an exception, like how Kamaljeet said as well. She make it as exceptional the way she can have, but she keeps it in limit. She will not overdo it. She'll not like take the whole lot of the gra prasad, but maybe just a bit, just to that she has mumitalanya, you know, and then she'll just go to the langar has kheer, just a bit, maybe 2-3 spoons, so that it's done. Yeah, but I do agree that if you keep it in limit or you keep it in control, and if you balance it off with the Sikhism, I think it's fine. From what I've seen and learned.
Okay, go ahead, Raj Narinder Kaur.
So I think it's each individual and where they are in their journey of nutrition and how they want to, I guess, live their life. I know individuals, and it's the same anywhere, like when you go, and any culture, any religion, right? You go to the doctor and the doctor says, okay, you're obese. There's certain steps that you need to do to take care of yourself. And some people do it and some people don't. I think within if everyone was to follow Sikhi to the T, it's laid out. Yes, you have to exercise, and yes, you have to physically and mentally stimulate and exercise your mind, exercise your body, and don't eat the wrong things. But everybody's in their own lives and they're in their own situations, and then you get exposed to certain, it's called, there's the Rajagun, Tamagun, and Satagun foods, right? And those things, it talks about it in Gurusahib, and maybe, Virji, Manjeet Singh has more around that. But if you go after those rich tastes, right, all the time, that's going to have an effect. Right? That's going to have an effect on you. If you go with the simple dal, roti kind of foods, those are going to have an effect. And that's what, spiritually, it talks about it. The same way I talk about the Rajagun, Tamagun, and Satagun foods, I would say even the visual stimulations that are out there, right? We go with the Maya-ridden music or the Hankar-filled music and the Maya-ridden movies or something, right? That it affects your senses. If you're putting yourself in those kind of situations, it affects you regardless of your faith, regardless of it's a sangat that's around you, right? And the other point I just want to make, and I'll just end really quickly, and we talked about it in our little conversation. I know in England more so, because I have a lot of friends there, that there is this vegetarianism, and that's Sikhi, and that's there. Here in the States, I don't know how this came about or why the mentality here is different, but the Rahat Maryada de vich likhya that you cannot eat halal meat. So if you're following the Rahat Maryada, which is the Sikh code of conduct, it does not say you are a vegetarian. So a lot of my Sikh friends, a lot of my Amritari Sikh friends do eat meat. I am vegetarian, and that was, you know, after I understood more of Gurbani and spirituality, I became vegetarian. I wasn't vegetarian my entire life. Even though, right, you're growing up and you're in a Gursikh family, Amritari, and it's I don't know why, but here at least, and around me, the Sangat, we follow the Rahat Maryada, which is halal meat. So you don't eat halal meat, but you can eat meat.
Okay.
Same as here as well. Sorry to add to that, Rakshana. Even in Malaysia, because Malaysia is a Muslim country, so we are bound by a lot of halal food around us, a lot. So yeah, what a lot of people do is they try to go to the Chinese side of the food, which is non-halal. But yeah, there are people who follows what you call that Ram Maryada, but also they do, because we are in the situation where we have no choice of eating halal. Something like, let's say an example, you want a pizza. Pizza is going to be halal, right? So if you want to eat meat, there's no choice. There's minimum choices on that. So a lot of people tend to do this. Yeah, like I give you an example. McDonald's is all halal. If you talk about anything, there's only a very few Chinese restaurants or cuisine that would have non-halal. So yeah, we are used to it, and we get to it, and sometimes it's against us, but we have no choice. In my case, sometimes you either go straight directly vegetarian, or you
I want to comment. I want to comment on that back, because when you say you have no choice, the comment I would say back is, during COVID, right? My boys love bagels, right? Obviously we couldn't go out and get these bagels. What do? We made bagels at home. So you can make pizza at home, and you can make your burgers at home. We make amazing veggie burgers that we don't have to go out and do. But it's a more effort, right? It's the more effort as to how far. It's not a quick fast food kind of pickup. But I'll say, now looking back on the time that we had during COVID, the fact that my boys can make bagels, they can make baguettes, we can make so many different kinds of foods. Like, we were craving these foods, we just looked up the recipes, and we had all the time in the world. So we learned how to do a lot of things with our own hands. And honestly, I think they tasted better because of all the other ingredients and the processed foods and other things that they put in there. We had the choice to put in or not put in, right? So there is that choice.
That's so interesting. And as you were speaking, Rajnarind, it reminded me of the fact that about 100 years ago, when Mahatma Gandhi first came to England as a vegetarian, and he was a very strict vegetarian, they told him that he would die. You know, the English people thought he would die. They said, it's okay for you to be a vegetarian back in India, but here in the cold climate, without eating meat, you will die. You see how far we've come in 100 years. So whereas 100 years ago, people couldn't, they couldn't grasp that concept of somebody being vegetarian in a cold country. And now you are talking about, well, there is always a choice, and Kamaljeet being a vegan, it's like, look at the distance traveled, from people saying vegetarians cannot exist in England to now the growing kind of normalization of veganism. And so I suppose the ideologies that we've kind of adopted, they have an influence, and sometimes that influence is subtle, but we've kind of in a way paved the way, haven't we? And this whole thing about the bridging, it's not as though like, well, one kind of ideology is bad, because some people have to eat meat because for generations that's what they have, their ancestors have always eaten meat, they've lived in cold climates, and so for them it might be not very good for their health to suddenly become vegan from being predominantly meat eater. So it's a case of how long does it take for people to adapt and to adjust and to adapt a new way of life, to synthesize what what is already existent and the new thing that needs to manifest. Any comments on that?
Can I give a small insight into this from our Guru Sahib? See, Guru Sahib gives the greatest importance to the human body. And this is our body that makes us great. You know, we have a brilliant mind that no other creature has. That is what makes us distinct from other creatures. Now, when we talk about whether we should eat vegetarian food or non-vegetarian food, or maybe someone is a vegan, now there's a very good insight that Guru Sahib gives. It is you eat whatever is good for your body, and the body's inherent intelligence is such that it runs on a 24-hour cycle. So whatever you eat should be digested and excreted from the body within 24 hours. Whatever fulfills that, whatever food fulfills that criteria, that is the food to eat for humans. Whatever takes longer will affect the body proportionately. If the food you eat takes 32 hours or 36 hours or maybe even longer, like for example, some meats may take up to 72 hours for the body to absorb and excrete, they are called tamasic foods or whatever. They are not good for the body, and hence because Guru Granth Sahib is not a commandment, it's a life guide. It doesn't say do this or don't do that. It gives you insights, it gives you knowledge, it gives you, values that you can think, because this mind is great. We have to contemplate, we have to think through everything that is coming our way. So when we talk about foods, the simple thumb rule that Guru Sahib gives is eat what is absorbed and digested and excreted within 24 hours. That is good for the body.
Well, yeah, that's again very interesting, Manjeet Singh Ji. But when I was diagnosed as diabetic 3 years ago, I'd come back from a pilgrimage to Pakistan to visit all the Gurdwara, Nankana Sahib, etc. And on a daily basis, I lived off prashad. So my diet for about 9 days was simply a diet of prashad and rasmalai and things like that, because we were staying at these luxurious hotels where desserts were freely available, and that's what I chose. It wasn't the salads, it was the rasmalai. That's where I spent most of my time. And I came here and was diagnosed diabetic because I I suppose overdosed on sugar. So you see, the sugar, it can, I'm not sure how long it takes to digest. So I know that with meat, it takes a lot longer to digest compared with vegetables, but it does, doesn't it? Meat takes a lot.
If I answer that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, basically it is a choice that you made. You could have made some other choice.
I know, but
you knew you were going to a far off place where you will struggle with your foods and you may not get what you want to eat. You knew that before you left. So that is where your preparation comes into play, and that is where Guru Sahib says you have a wonderful mind that can do everything, that can plan for you. Sugars, anything is sugar at the end of the day. Whether you eat meat, whether you eat vegetables, whether you eat chapati, anything you eat, rice, it is sugar at the end of the day. And it doesn't take too now. Foods like meat, Guru Sahib hasn't. We get only vegetarian foods in a Gurdwara. Why don't we just serve non-veg foods? What's the reason? And although, as someone pointed out, I don't remember that even Amritdhari Sikhs, they eat. Some of them eat meat. Sikhs are known to be meat eaters, and I mean, when I see this thing, I mean, I just feel that people haven't read Guru Granth Sahib at all. We have just grasped Guru Granth Sahib Ji from Google or from word of mouth that people have heard from others, and that is how Sikhi is doing. So the core Sikhi teaching is very simple. It's a simplistic life, the most simple life that you can live. I mean, just apply the basic common sense to your body, and you will become a perfect Sikh. That is as simple as that.
Yes, and the thing is that we don't always follow wisdom.
That's our problem. That's our problem. We can't do that. We struggle with that.
Yes, we are imperfect creatures, and sometimes we choose the path that is more attractive rather than the path that is the best path for us, I suppose. And that leads me to the final question for today, which is about, we talked about it a little bit earlier about transformation. Like, do we focus on transformation as though this is only one life out of many lives, and we will, if we make mistakes in this life, we will have the opportunity to rectify those mistakes later? Because that kind of concept of like, well, I've had lots of lives before, I will have lots of lives after this, and so therefore I don't have to be perfect in this life. That will kind of drive us to behave in a particular kind of behavior, compared with if our concept is that this is the only life we're going to have, we were born, we will die, and what we've got to make the most of this in between, this is the only life that we have. We would behave perhaps in a different way. We're not going to carry any debts over to the next life, as it were, or we're not going to carry forward any gains, any gifts, any boons, and we're not going to carry them forward into another life. So therefore, why bother building up this, investing in character, for example? You see, so how do we weigh up? So it's not like one is good, one is a good way of behaving, and one is a bad way of behaving. How do we balance both ideologies? Please raise your hand so I know you've got something to say about that. Kamaljeet Kaur.
Thank you. This is really interesting. I've had a conversation with Ganni at the Gurdwara about this, where I've mentioned something to him. He said, "Oh, Pichle Karm da, that's the impact of that." And I think in Gurbani it's written, please correct me if I'm wrong, 8.4 million reincarnations as part of that, I guess, reincarnation cycle. And Gurbani teaches us this is we get the opportunity in this human life form to dedicate our life to Sikhi and what Gurusahib teaches us. So I think some of it goes back to maybe one of the earlier questions you made around, you talked about almost hukum versus like determination or self-will, and also understanding that everything is based on Guru's grace, and the deeds on how we've behaved and what we've done, I think is reflective in that. I think for me that it's that simple, really, rather than you could live your life, make the most of my life and be selfish and do things that would benefit me to make my life more enjoyable, but actually is that on the path of Sikhi? Is that what Sikhi teaches us? And for me it's not that simple. Yeah
it is very complicated. You see, so we like in response to what Manjeet Singh was saying about, well, a lot of people don't know what Sikhi is. We're not, the purpose of these conferences and leadership is not about like how much we know what Sikhi really is. It's more about how do we apply what we know, because we're all highly successful professionals, and we have become highly successful because we've chosen particular behaviors, to enable us to become leaders in our own fields. And so what we've done up to now is like we have made sense, and now it's a question of like how have we done this? How have we balanced what we know, the little we know about Sikhi, the little we know about science, the little we know about all these different things? How have we synthesized all these things to become highly successful professionals? Go ahead, Rajnarind, please.
So I wanted to, I guess, comment on, again, maybe it not being a Sikhi question, right? In Christianity, they have something called confession. And you go in and you confess your sins. And is it okay then to keep doing them? If I go murder someone, I go to confession and then I say, oh, I've murdered someone, I'm really sorry. And then the next day or the next week, you do it again and you go back to confession. Obviously, I don't think that's what Christianity is teaching, right? You confess because you are sorry, apologetic, and you won't do it again. The point is to not do it again. That garam, so then you bring in Sikhi, the garam, the past actions do have an effect, and they same way. I'll go back to again, if you put yourself into certain situations and you make possibly the wrong choices, that will have an effect. They will have consequences that will then in turn in today's life have that effect. If you extrapolate that out and you kind of say, if I make a decision now in my next janam, right, it will have an effect. And to Kamaljeet's point, we are given this human life, which is so precious. That's, we do it every day in Dada Sahib, right? Peparapat Manak Dehuriya, right? That Shabad, if you actually read the meaning of it, you're given this life right now, use it to the utmost, to everything that you can do, so that next life you will be all the karam will have its effect, and you'll be in that path more so closer, right, to Vaheguru and to merging, because our heaven and hell, our hell is this earth, right? Our hell is this janam, this reincarnation of going back and forth. Our heaven is the merging with God, if we want to kind of do the analogy within heaven and hell and Christianity and all that stuff. I mean, that's how I look at it. Again, that's how I've been kind of coming to, I guess, comparisons, right? And to me, when I explain to my friends that this is my hell, I don't want to keep going through lives. I want to merge with that one light, right, into that jot, and that is pureness, right? That's oneness.
Yes, and this whole concept of duality, like heaven and hell, is life on earth heaven, or is life on earth hell? That's again kind of going back into that duality, isn't it? And the concept of, like, is the purpose of our life to merge as one and, you know, attain bliss through emergence, or is it about achieving our individual potential, our unique potential? Because there will be drivers that say, no, you have to climb the highest mountain and you have to be the one right at the top of the mountain. It's not, you know, unless you become number one, you're not going to have achieved your potential. There's always, like, you know, the fastest runner, the 4-minute mile, you know, who's going to break those records? So unless you've kind of, you know, broken through those ceilings, whatever ceilings they are, then you haven't actually achieved your full potential. You haven't advanced humanity. And the other notion is, like, no, as long as we have merged, we might be at the grassroots level. We don't have to be at the top level. We don't have to be senior managers. We can be, you know, the people, the minions, and still achieve bliss, can't we? Okay, so final comments. I know we've just about run out of time, but let me just ask if there are any other comments that you'd like to make before we bring the discussion to a close.
Can I add something to what Raj said just now?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
All right, Raj, you made a very interesting point. Parapat Manuk Dehuriya, right? And I will just read the next line, which gives the purpose to the first line, which is Gobind Milanti Ehu Teri Bariya. So this human life is the life to meet with God. And the question starts from karma and destiny, and you also raise Christian's point of view, and, you know, the three Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, they believe in, you know, the judgment day. But after we are gone, then there will be sometimes in future there would be a judgment day on which our deeds will be decided, and based on that, someone will go to heaven and someone will go to hell, and someone might go somewhere else. So basically, the one interesting thing that Gurusahib has exposed is about life is nothing but energy, and energy cannot be created, cannot be destroyed. It can only be transformed. So when people talk about, when some religions or when anybody talks about that this life is the only thing that we have, I mean, that doesn't sound very prudent, you know. I mean, energy is such a known concept that no one can destroy it. So it has got to take another shape. It has got to take another form. And Guru Sahib has categorically mentioned Kai Janam Payo Keet Patanga, Kai Janam Payo. I mean, there have been so many incarnations of this soul energy that we have, and with a great deal of fortune and great destiny, it is that we have found this human body. So when we talk about karma or our deeds, indeed, every single thing that we do adds to our energy. It is like a bank account. What we do, we are taking out our our cash, and we are depositing our cash. What we do, everything takes out something, everything adds up something, and at the end of the when we shall leave our body in this life, whatever would be our, you can say, the karmic account or the karmic balance, or whatever is the net of that energy that we will take with us, will determine our future, our next life. And this particular line that Guru Sahib has given, "Pahi parapat manuk de huriya, Gobind milan ki eho teri bariya," it sums up everything about this life. That this life is the only good fortune that you have. It is now that you can understand your life and you can move into eternity. You can get that, you can leave the cycle of reincarnation and become one with God. You can merge into God. And Jyoti Jyot Samana, Punjabi. This is the time. Once this life is gone, there's no other life that we are going to get this thing again. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, that is another, some people focus on energy and some people focus on the body. Some people think of life as being the body is life, and some people think, well, no, it's not. The body is going, the body has a linear lifespan. It's the body is born and the body dies, but the energy, as you say, is simply transformed. The energy has no birth and it has no death. It's simply a transformation through time and space and whatever. Does anybody have any final comments before we close?
Just want to say thank you. It was lovely meeting you all.
Yes, absolutely
Nice
wonderful. Yes, wonderful to have a discussion with you, and I look forward to the next one. It's I feel that I'm on an amazing journey with you all, and we're all learning together. And as we discuss, hopefully next time we have this conference, we will be going even deeper into the subjects that we, and again, it's like to emphasize, it's not simply about how much do we know about Sikhi? It's about what is it that we're applying from Sikhi? The focus is on the application of it.
Obviously, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. All right then, everybody.
Nice meeting you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank
And
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa,
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki
Waheguru Ji Ki
Fateh.
Fateh.
Yeah.